Hi everyone, I kind of wanted to talk about the state of Super Tank and why, at least for me personally, it's ruining my fun and experience with Overwatch. To be honest with you, there's a lot of things in the game spanning from the DPS and the support role when it comes to balance issues that I can generally ignore and still enjoy the game. But when it comes to tank, it just feels like I'm facing somebody that has three people's worth of gameplay impact compared to me. And if you are not fighting this person as a 2 to 3 man unit, there's generally nothing you can do about it because they will just take over the game and there's nothing you can do. And the worst part is if you have a tank who's egoing his pick and not counter picking, it's basically over for you guys, right? I really want to talk about the problem with the tank role, and this is not something that's exclusive to Overwatch. It's something that's happened in other PvP games too, League of Legends, Marvel Rivals, etc., etc. I want to dig into the tank player philosophy. I've ranted about it before on this channel for about 2 years, where I've said specifically around season 8 for Overwatch 2, I said tank is not in a bad spot. Tank as a role is just misunderstood in what it's meant to be. A lot of people play tank like it's fat DPS, and all they want tank to be is fat DPS. But what you end up getting is where tank is now, is that it's a very homogenized role and they all lean into one playstyle, which is the brawl playstyle. We've lost a lot of unique gameplay styles that have come with characters like Wrecking Ball and Winston because we've just allowed every other tank to exist and get value and farm value in that way. Now, firstly, I want to talk about the wrong direction to take the tank role. Overwatch is not the first one to try the super tank idea and see how it goes. League of Legends had an item in their game that was called Heartsteel, and basically I'm just gonna like super dumb it down so it's easy to understand. Heartsteel was an item that allowed the tanks in League of Legends to basically not die. They could have really good damage output. They could have the best CC in the game. They could like contest any area or space that they wanted. They could help enable their DPS, and they were ridiculous. Remind you of any other gameplay style that exists in Overwatch now? Well, it's the super tanks. Now, prior to season 9 and season 11, I would say season 11 is where it got really bad. I would say season 8 tank was not in a bad spot. There were some small balance problems here and there with tanks, that is for sure, and it was usually the same culprits, the Orisa Mauga Roadhog rotation. But the problem with tanks is that majority of the tank players, now I'm not saying all, majority of tank players approach tank with this perspective that this is the big fat DPS role, when in reality tank is more about being a 3D chess game master where you're supposed to know how to take space, how to then give up space for a little bit, how to retake that space, how to enable your DPS to take an angle, how to, well, peel for your supports. These are a lot of things that if you go into any generic quick play game, your average tanks are not able to display that. A lot of tanks just think that tank is hold W, walk down main, and try your best to get a kill or get blown up as a result or counter pick, etc., etc. It kind of goes from there. And the problem is that Blizzard actually tried leaning into this, what I would like to call the toxic tank playstyle, which is, well, what if we did allow our tanks in 5v5 to kind of be able to do whatever they want? That's what they want, right? That's the quote unquote tank player fantasy, that they want to be the big guy that appears, takes the space, denies the space, does whatever he wants, has some of the best utility in the game, has some of the best ultimates in the game, etc., etc. They actually leaned into it with the season 11 Kaiju Watch patch, but in my opinion, the problem is you can't give somebody with that much HP really good damage breakpoints, really good ability to stay alive and sustainability, really good ultimates that can pretty much turn the course of a fight around if they know what they're doing, or instantly end a team fight that as it starts. The list kind of goes from there, right? You guys can see the point that I'm making. It's like, well, then what's the trade-off of playing tank? Well, then the argument can be made is that, well, you're playing the tank role. The trade-off is that you are playing tank. Yeah, but then you've kind of removed all the weaknesses that came with playing the tank role, and it's a lot less about the 3D chess part of it, and you've kind of leaned into the more Mauga Roadhog playstyle of, well, you are a big fat DPS. Now, to be honest with you guys, I don't want more you are the fat DPS playstyles in the tank role in any game, right? I would rather have interesting, unique playstyles in the tank role. And even though I don't particularly like Wrecking Ball, he's the last time we had a unique tank in Overwatch where it wasn't a tank that was just a ground tank focused on brawling. When was the last time we had a tank that I think that did anything different other than, well, it's a ground tank that brawls? And no, please don't use the Hazard example because it doesn't count. Hazard's leap, the right way to use it is to peel for your backline or to secure a kill on an escaping target. Playing him in the dive playstyle just gets him blown up. So I don't even think you can count him as a quote-unquote dive tank. He's more of a brawl tank with like a Reinhardt charge, but in a slightly different fashion, right? Otherwise, what are we going to say? Ryan is also is also a dive tank. Let's not go down that route, right? So in my opinion, like, you can never solve the problem that comes with the tank role, which is like people's idea and definition of how to have fun on tank is exactly just that. That, well, I should be able to do everything because I'm doing my team a favor by playing tank. I should be able to pop off this, that, etc., etc. I just can't believe that Overwatch actually leaned into this philosophy and ended up creating, in my opinion, the most toxic role I've ever played against in a video game. I go play a lot of other PvP games, and no game can suck the life, suck the fun out of the game as fast as it is facing a Kaiju Watch super tank in Overwatch right now. The worst part is if you're playing against any of the meta tanks right now, Orisa, Ramatra, and Hazard and Roadhog are really close behind. I feel like even if Orisa and Ramatra get nerfed, Hazard and Roadhog are just budget versions of both those characters, and in my opinion, I can see both of them taking over, right? Ramatra and Hazard are basically block bots who will just never die and are really good at taking in resources and then just outright deleting anything that's in their vicinity right after that. Orisa and Roadhog are just really good at staying alive, and then, well, Orisa is really good at just zoning and space control, and Roadhog is just really good at then right after, like, surviving, just deleting a target and then forcing you to take a 5v4. I'm talking about 5v5 mostly because that's the core game mode, unfortunately. On the other side, the problems with the Kaiju Watch tank has begun to leak into the 6v6k mode. As I discussed in another video, Double Shield is back and it is seeing play, and there's even variations of it. I know people are like, hey, I see Ramatra Sigma Double Shield, etc., 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 etc. The point is that we didn't learn anything when it came to, well, why is it that when we look at characters like Winston and Reinhardt, these are tanks that are fun to play against, people are willing to play them, even to some degree Doomfist, like falls into this category as well. But when it comes to characters like Mauga, Orisa, Ramatra, Roadhog, and in some cases, sometimes Sigma, why are these characters that can be really unfun to play against is because these characters are way more centered around this gameplay philosophy that, well, I can out-sustain, I can survive anything and everything you want to do, and once you run out of the resources and I've acknowledged that, I'm going to walk in, delete you, and there's nothing you can do about it, right? But when it comes to Reinhardt, when it came to Winston, and even although Empower Punch is annoying, even when it comes to Doomfist, they have to be really smart with how they take their engages because they're going to be trading off parts of their kit that allow them to sustain. We cannot have characters that don't have any trade-offs because right now, majority of the tanks in Overwatch 2, outside of maybe Reinhardt, Winston, Junker Queen, to be honest, like I don't think Queen is that bad. It feels like there's no trade-off to anything they want to do. Zarya can bubble surf and still do really good damage. Sigma can always sustain himself while also doing really good damage. And then the list just kind of goes on from there, right? One of the characters that, like, I never ever was annoyed playing into is now a character that I just think is ridiculously OP is D.Va. I think D.Va is being hyper slept upon. Again, I know she doesn't really have a good matchup into the current state of Ram or Orisa because she just doesn't have enough burst to burst them down and they can take the longer fight with her and delete her. But D.Va is another character that I feel like is in that, sleeper state right now where she's giga OP, and once Ramatra Orisa meta kind of like, hopefully gets nerfed in the upcoming patches, she's going to begin to shine like crazy as well because, oh my god, if you ban Zarya, and I mean, technically you can still play Sim into her, but even a good D.Va knows how to play around Symmetra. D.Va feels like an unkillable monster. It just comes down to somebody being an idiot on D.Va. But if the D.Va is smart, knows how to just control space, knows how to peel for her backline, knows how to position herself and where she should be and why, you can't contest her. And that's kind of the trend that's happening in tank right now. It's like the good tank players are even better now because they know how to take advantage of all these insane passives that have been vomited onto the tank role, all the insane sustainability buffs and the OP perks that they've been given to survive. It's like, when they're trying to encourage tanks to use the other perks that aren't focused on sustainability, why would you ever want to use them when surviving is 10 times better anyway? Right? It's like when it comes to the D.Va major perks, should I take the one that gives me overhealth when I'm using defense matrix, or should I take the fun E that will give me like really cool like big rockets? Well, as much as the cool E thing is and it's fun to use, if I want to win a game, surviving, drawing out resources, and then punishing somebody is a lot more fun, is a lot more better for me to use than it is for me to go for the ability that might get negated through the other guy's sustain anyway. And this is the problem. As long as we have sustain be the name of the game, and we are just trying to go around it by cleverly dividing it across the role. Like, okay, we'll give some sustain to support, and we'll give some sustain power to tank, and then they'll, carry it like that. Nothing has actually changed, right? Because we're cleverly dividing it. We're not actually addressing the sustain problem. And the only point of concern is that the devs don't really see a problem with it. Now, for the first time in a very long time, I even saw Super crash out about Ramatra's block, right? And that it's a bug. Guys, how can a bug stay in a game for this long? At this point, I think it's intentional for them to keep Ramatra this OP, right? And where he is. And I don't know. I'm just not a fan of Super Tank. and I think it's wrong. I think it also is the reason why the DPS role is beginning to lose its identity yet again, and that's just because tanks can do everything the DPS does but 10 times better. And that's why they've had to go as far as to buffing the DPS passive even more. And I can see even more DPS power creep in the near future because, again, in my opinion, the DPS are struggling to compete with tanks and the state of support as a whole. And in my opinion, the solution is to nerf tanks. And I know it's going to make a lot of casual tank players upset, but they're always going to be upset because all they do is pick tank and run it down mid and die and rinse and repeat. They still do it even with super tanks. So there's no point trying to alleviate their experience because they just refuse to learn the game. It's like having a heal bot support, not realizing that they can sometimes do something else. And it can improve with their gameplay experience, they can have more impact. But that requires them to be aware, be situationally aware that they can do that. It's the same problem, like kind of in a different way for the tank role. Is that majority of tanks think it's like, yeah, I mean, look at a typical Reiner player. The typical Reiner player from the casuals is a guy that just holds his shield, barrier bots the entire game, uses the excuse that he had 10k damage blocked, and dies on cooldown, and never does anything proactive, and then he says, well, guys, I'm playing tank. Like, isn't this what tank is about? Then you have the opposite end of that, where it's another guy with a peanut-sized brain, and he just runs it down mid on Ryan by hitting the charge button on cooldown, and he's like, well, guys, like, I'm trying, but I just keep getting blown up. And that's what the current state of tank, where they're all kaijus, right? So it's like, then you have, like, the actual good tank player who understands how to be situationally aware, how to use his abilities and how to take space, deny space, etc., etc. And that guy is just the server admin now. My little rant aside, I don't think leaning into bad players and making the game easier for them is ever what you can consider a competitive video game. Because a lot of the changes that they've made over time is leaning into alleviating the frustration of bad players. If you actually think about it from this perspective, a lot of the changes in the game, with perks, with the projectile size increases, with the HP pool increases, begins to make a lot of sense. Guys, they literally increased the HP pool so that breakpoints got messed up, so that there was more time for support players and bad DPS and tank players to react to things and adjust. Let's be for real. Like, it's why it's so hard to call Overwatch a competitive. It's so hard to call Overwatch a competitive game nowadays because it's so many of the changes are clearly geared towards making the game more casual friendly, so that they can then convert those casual players into people that spend money in the shop, and then it goes from there. That's the end of my rant. I want to hear your thoughts about the state of Super Tank down below. It's completely fine if you disagree. I'm not going to hold it against you. Shout out to the Patreons over here. See you in the next video.